But elsewhere this week, we did hear some rather fruity language, didn't we? Let's treat ourselves to a little reminder of the moment Hugo Keith KC read out some of Dominic Cummings' spicier pandemic WhatsApp messages.
You called ministers useless pigs, morons, in emails and WhatsApps to your professional colleagues. Do you think you contributed to a lack of effectiveness on the part of ministers and of the Cabinet?
No, I think I was reflecting a widespread view.
I'm not too bothered by that language. Are you at home? On a scale of 1 to 10, how disturbed or perturbed are you by that? I suspect not a lot of you are. So let's remember, at the time, the government was in a state of emergency, high-stakes crisis. No one knew the extent of the virus. Life and death decisions were being made every day. The government was taking a battering every day too in the media. The death toll was being pumped into our living rooms every night. Against this backdrop, I suspect a bit of fruity language was the very least of our problems. So I'm going to throw this to the panel tonight, to the Saturday Five. Albie, what do you reckon? Bit of fruity language from Dominic Cummings, but surely the inquiry, what they should be focusing on is whether lockdown was worth it.
Well, exactly. I think my worry about this whole inquiry is it's now become the latest whip with which we should lash Boris Johnson with, rather than actually looking at the things which are going to stop us making the awful mistakes that we made during the pandemic. I just think it's turned into a complete rubbish show, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, Connor, I wonder what you think about this, because to me it seems that once again, yet again, the media are more concerned with the tittle-tattle, the superficial, the mudslinging, the personalities, rather than getting to the crux of the matter.
Yeah, it's a giant distraction because we're not evaluating whether or not lockdown caused immense amount of harms, whether it was economically worth it, whether or not it saved an immense amount of lives. I mean, the Johns Hopkins University meta-analysis already said that it only saved 1,700 compared to all the extra cancer deaths and deaths from despair.
It's a bit like a culture war.
Well, yeah, sort of. It's a bit of a personality mudslinging match, but something they didn't go into in whether or not the government was doing its job and in how it was talking to people and colleagues. James Rubin, a scientist that was part of Independent Sage, was at the panel and he said, we didn't try and scare anyone. And well, as Laura Dodsworth documented in her book before, kind of contradicts the 2020 Sage Minute Notes where they said that we were trying to elevate people's level of perceived risk because they weren't complying with lockdown laws. There's no scrutiny of whether or not...
I think Emily's going to swear at you in a minute.
Well, there's no scrutiny.
Well, I'm just hoping everyone at home is keeping up with you, Connor, there, because you were throwing out different reports, different statistics, but it's good stuff. Benjamin, would you slag off your colleagues in a WhatsApp?
Well, do you know, I was going to say that you shouldn't swear about your colleagues, but then I remembered that Boris Johnson is now one of our colleagues, so maybe I've changed my mind. Do you know what? I do think that obviously things get tense, especially, you know, if you're running a business and you're trying to make ends meet, let alone running the country in a crisis. But I think you shouldn't use that language about your colleagues, because ultimately you have to build a relationship, you have to work with them, you have to get solutions. And is having that attitude in which you describe them in such, you know, aggressive way, is that really inducive to getting
Surely you'd
anywhere?
agree with Dominic Cummings. I mean, look at the Boris Johnson's cabinet. Do you think that they were up to scratch?
I'm terrified to say anything. Instead, I quote what they actually said. Look, I might disagree that they're a bit useless, or, you know, worse than a bit useless, maybe a bit unethical at times. But I just think if, you know, I can talk about them like that. You know, Matt Hancock, thank God, isn't my colleague. But if you're in a close environment working with people, I think you have to act with a certain level of respect that says you can't call them effing and jeffing.
Darren, do you think these WhatsApp messages should have even been the focus point of the inquiry? It was rather bizarre to see Hugo Keith KC reading out this coarse language and then using it to, I don't know, show evidence of some kind of culture.
I just can't understand what relevance they are to the inquiry, as in the fruity language used. How on earth, if in fact, Emily, what I would say is I don't think this government has been as effective than since he was in charge. When Dominic Cummings was in number 10, at least things got done. Benjamin Butterworth might not agree with what was being done, but at least the country was getting things done. So I personally can't stand this HRification of absolutely everything, where they go through WhatsApps with a fine-toothed comb looking for nasty words, hurty words that we can all twist about in the papers. Get a grip. I mean, the country was going through this virus that was ripping apart the country.
Also, those people are not going to be in government again, most likely. So surely the learnings about the personalities and the language that Dominic Cummings used is pretty irrelevant, right?